I've watched people open a bagged salad kit and not wash the lettuce. And I'm going, but I still wash the lettuce. I mean, that's just me. And that's not a knock on anyone that works within prepared salads. I think they definitely do a great job. I just am a little bit extra like that.
Hello and welcome to the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US, a podcast in which we explore the mind-bending world of global supply chains, covering topics such as automation, innovation, unique identity, and more. I'm your co-host, Reid.
And I'm Liz.
And welcome to the show.
Reid and I just had a conversation with Christina Herrick at the Packer, and we covered a whole bunch of topics. Traceability and FSMA 204 are top of mind because of the produce industry being very much impacted by FSMA 204. One of the key highlights for me is when she said compliance is not a light switch and organizations need to get started when thinking about FSMA and what they need to do and talking to trading partners about working towards compliance in 2028. She also mentioned the complexity of produce, and every commodity is a little bit different in the process. And many organizations only have one person that wears a lot of different hats. And so thinking about traceability is going to be a little bit more challenging for them. Enjoy.
Hey, Christina, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is kind of role reversal for me. So I've already apologized once before we hit record that I might try to drive the bus. I'm going to try not to do that today.
No. We're delighted to have you, and we're looking forward to this conversation. But before we jump into everything, if you wouldn't mind, just for our audience, if you could just introduce yourself, give a little bit about your background and where you're working today.
My name's Christina Herrick, and hopefully everyone kind of already knows that getting into this episode, but I'm the produce editor for the Packer. I've been with the Packer since 2023, covering the fresh produce industry, although I focus a lot on food safety, which is part of the reason we're talking today, but I do ag labor, economics, and I also previously to working at the Packer wrote for American Fruit Grower. I'm a grower-focused publication on specialty crops, so I have a little bit of a background. I wasn't a newbie when I joined the Packer.
Awesome.
It's always Christina and I run into each other at shows, and we've been talking about doing this for a while. So we're really excited that you're here and to talk about it. Jumping into kind of the guts of the conversation, one of the things that I know goes on is consumers think about food and produce and traceability, and then there's kind of what actually happens in the supply chain. And I was wondering if you could give your perspective on some of the disconnects there from what we see when we go to the grocery store to actually what the supply chain looks like from a produce perspective.
Yeah, well, it's funny when you started asking that question, I immediately thought about the consumer, and I'm thinking, I'll use my parents as a base. I mean, not that that's what everyone should, but, I don't think they have any clue what goes into food safety. Consumers, I think, have no idea. I definitely think, as we look into the food chain, I don't necessarily think, everyone knows what all goes into it. I don't necessarily think maybe the retailer understands exactly what the grower has to do. I don't necessarily think the grower may think about what goes on when they get that produce to a distributor. So I guess to answer your question, from my perspective, I think there's still a lot of disconnect on what's done and maybe the influence that those particular steps might have on that final outcome to the consumer. That's at least my thought,
Yeah, I think we all take for granted food safety. Like, we're busy. I go to the grocery store, expiration date, good to go, moving on from there, and really don't give it too much of a thought.
Yeah, I think that's very true. And, I guess that maybe that's a compliment to where things are with the food safety industry in that, we as consumers might take that for granted. I mean, I've watched people open a bagged salad kit and not wash the lettuce. And I'm going, but I still wash the lettuce. I mean, that's just me. And that's not a knock on anyone that works within prepared salads. I think they definitely do a great job. I just am a little bit extra like that.
Yeah, I'm definitely guilty of opening the bag and just putting it in the bowl and starting to mix it. And my wife's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Put it in the salad spreader thing where we're pumping the
spinner. Yeah, if you got it. Gotta have a spinner.
Yeah. Well, we talk about traceability quite a bit, and there's traceability in fresh produce space specifically. I would like to know, how does that differ from the other parts of the food industry? And is there a significant difference from fresh produce to the canned foods, bagged foods?
Well, I'll say, do a shameless plug for being a GS1 event to kind of understand the bigger picture. Because to be honest with you, I didn't realize just how different fresh produce was coming from this side of it. And granted, when I gave my background, I worked on the grower side. So, we were so focused on production and things like that I didn't necessarily think about all of the food safety. Food packing houses were a part of it, but that was really kind of where the buck stopped in my previous role. So thinking about it now, I hear about where, there's certain data elements that are reused, right? There's some lot codes and things like that might be used or applied broadly. Things like that I think, where you're talking about maybe a CPG, something packaged that might have a barcode where things are a little bit more detailed. I've heard a lot of that when I do stories, is that, there's obviously that's why FSMA 204 is in place to kind of bring some of that information into a place where it's shareable. But yeah, in my mind, traceability is still kind of not there yet in terms of being able to share data, trace data truly, things like that. You can see some of the outbreaks where, the FDA is saying it might be this or that, but it's not fully traced down to a lot code, right?
And produce is it's different. I mean, fresh food, right? But it's different than CPG because it has such a short shelf life. And when you have a trace back or an outbreak, which ends up in a trace back, that product may not be on the shelf anymore. And so being able to very quickly get that information is so important, where a box of cereal or soup or whatever in the center of the store is just different. It's not going to move as quickly throughout that supply chain.
Yeah, and I guess the other part of it too, I was thinking, as Liz, you said, it might not be on the shelf. I was also thinking it might not even be grown in that same field. I mean, some fields, yes, they extend and seasons extend, but sometimes, if you're getting in between seasons or change of seasons, that produce might not be grown in that field anymore to be able to test.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Very scary.
Yeah, and as a general consumer walks into the grocery store, you have your tomatoes that are sitting out that you pick and put in a plastic bag and you weigh or whatever. Then you have your tomatoes that are in a bin, whether it's a plastic or it's a bag, and there has a barcode on it. And now maybe you're not me, but I'm just going to give my story. I grab that stack of bananas and I go to self-checkout, and it's like, I type in bananas, organic, regular, there's like 4 bananas to pick from, and I'm like, I don't know really which one there is. And then there's that little number on the banana. It's like, a little sticker with the 9C's. So where are we going with all of this?
Well, I mean, ideally, it's that conversation we just had that Liz mentioned. If there is a need for some kind of recall, you're able to trace it back. All of the steps it took from the moment it was picked all the way to the point it hit the grocery store, and to be able to trace it back to that farm, maybe that day, whatever. I mean, I think, the more you write about food safety, I don't know about you, and maybe you're kind of blissfully unaware. I feel like the more I learn about food safety, the more scared I get. And that's, again, not a knock on the fresh produce industry. I feel like they're doing a great job, but I also feel like there's just a lot of variables that just kind of happen along the way that can really change something and really influence something. So it is an interesting thing. The more you know isn't always necessarily the best thing.
Yeah, ignorance is definitely bliss, but I would like to go back to your original comment, which is we take it for granted because it is working so well. Yeah. And I truly believe that the FSMA 204, a lot of perspectives on it. It's definitely a change. It's definitely work, but it's just going to make everything so much better, even for the growers and the distributors and the retailers. Everyone will benefit from it, but just like anything else, changes can be a little bit of a pain in the butt.
Well, I think part part of the problem is, right, that the industry, it's taken so long to get to this point. There hasn't been a whole lot of modernization along the way. And I think that's kind of why it hurts in many ways for implementation, just because, it's been kind of piecemeal and kind of cobbled along for so long that the industry is so big now that it's going to take a lot more to actually get it in place and get it moving.
Yeah. People actually have to thoughtfully think through what needs to be done and then put a plan together, because 2028 is not as far away, I think, as people think, but it is possible. And there are so many people and organizations out there that can help with best practices, what works, what doesn't work, and just things to think about to get started. But Reid, to your bananas, the PLU code is 4011 for bananas.
Thank you. See, I mean,
I was actually going to say that. I was going to say, Reid, if you're scared of bananas for PLUs, good luck buying bulk apples.
Yeah. Or knowing what kind. I want to shift gears a little bit because there's so much going on. And I know you talked about the other pieces of your role other than food safety. I would love to ask about labor, the costs and the tariffs and trades and regulations like EPR, and how all of those together are affecting traceability. Or are they related? Because there's so much going on with these other things. Does it take those resources away? How do you see that playing out?
I think in many ways, EPRs are still a little new, to the point that I don't necessarily know that the fresh produce industry realizes its full impact. With California finally coming online and regulations coming, I think it's going to hit later. Like, that's almost a slow burn for our conversation today. I think those impacts are going to hit soon, and producers and growers are going to start to realize what's going on. But I still think that one's almost too new. Labor is definitely a huge issue. We're talking today on the day that Agriculture Committee Chairman just debuted a new labor regulation that's going to hopefully change the way the H-2A labor works in this country for the benefit. But, that obviously has to get passed. But, I've worked on a huge economic series, kind of breaking down some of the challenges, because labor is obviously a huge cost to growers. Sometimes it depends on the commodity, but for example, I've talked to the folks in Washington State, and growers there are basically, I think it's 110% of their gross returns went to labor. So they're not even being able to pay for anything else. It's inputs, it's fertilizer, that's anything else, not only themselves. So they're not even able to pay for that. So where I think that hits kind of rubber meets the road with traceability is, if you're a grower packer and you're getting almost nothing for your produce, are you able to make those investments in traceability?
Yeah.
And you have to. I mean, right, we're talking, we know FSMA 204 is coming, and, hopefully it doesn't get delayed again, but we know that deadline is coming. And so compliance is not necessarily a light switch that you can turn on. It's something you've got to work on and integrate. But, does that mean that could impact the cost and the affordability of implementing those programs? Maybe. I mean, I don't necessarily see it as an option. Like, that's not an option for them. So yeah, there's that. Trade tariffs have been kind of all over the place in terms of, where things are. To me, labor is kind of the number one. Obviously, tariffs and trade are a challenge. I also think regulations is another one. Again, that goes to EPRs, that goes to some other things that are kind of in the same sphere as labor. There's some regulations that are pretty onerous for certain growers of commodities, but yeah, it's definitely not an easy time to be a produce grower. So, growers are pretty resilient. That's the one thing that I've learned as I've talked to, growers over the X number of years, is they're able to face challenges, but, it's a little bit of predictability that's important to them. When things are kind of all over the place, that makes it very tough to factor in any changes, like, integrating traceability. But, if there's stability, they're able to kind of plan for, adapt, and move forward.
Yeah, I would love to double click into this traceability aspect of it. We covered, tariffs and regulations, and all of this. And we know it's coming. There was a push out, right? It was supposed to be here. Was it this year?
Yeah, January.
January, right? So there was a push out, which is good. From what we're hearing is that there's not going to be another push out. It's coming. We're 2028. What are you seeing? Like with companies, it's still all pretty new, but how are companies approaching this? And are you seeing areas where this is the big struggle or this is the big roadblock? Are you seeing any trends in it, and how are they approaching it?
I don't know if this is a trend. A lot of what I get the sense of is a lot of companies just don't know where to begin. There's obviously guidance from the FDA, but I think in some ways the sense I get is it's almost too broad to the point that, a lot of companies just don't know where to begin. And obviously there's a lot of solutions out there that can help with compliance, but I almost think that I hate to say it's like that decision fatigue, or that it's like you just don't know where to start, so you don't start. I also kind of wonder too, with companies that import into the US, I often wonder whether or not there's a lot of awareness on what needs to be done there as well. And maybe there's some what is it, cognizant dissonance, or maybe not wanting to know. But I do think there's a lot of not sure where to start, not sure how to share, and just kind of pretending like it'll go away.
Put their head in the sand.
Yeah, there might be a little bit of ostrich head in the sand going on too.
Fair enough. It's a big deal. And one of the questions that I was going to follow up with was, it feels like there is an awareness gap. And you talk to the bigger organizations, and they're certainly aware that FSMA is coming. Whether they then put their head in the sand or not, that's a different conversation. But the smaller grower packers, the terminal markets, like, I just feel like when you get a layer down into the size of company, there may be an awareness. And I would love to hear your perspective around that. And is there a way we can all kind of help them become aware and start this journey? Because, it's coming. Like Reid said, we think that from what we understand, 2028 is it. And it's not, like you said, and I wrote it down, this is not just turning the light switch on. This is a thoughtful process of collecting and sharing data.
I often interviewed a few folks in their FSMA 204 journey. And one lady I talked, her commodity is not necessarily what falls under FSMA, but they are getting prepared. But she wears multiple hats. So sometimes with those larger operations, it's very easy. They've got someone that's at least one person that's head of food safety, head of compliance, right? There is someone there that's in charge of figuring this out. A lot of times on the smaller ones, it's a grower that might be doing this too. It might be the owner. It might be somebody that does payroll. It's somebody else wearing a different hat. Like this lady, she also does sales. So she does sales and food safety. And I'm like, how do you do that? How do you wear two hats and do two full-time jobs well? And I think there might be a little bit of that. I've been kicking around an idea of doing kind of a series of getting ready, like the road to 2028, something like that, just because I feel like the industry needs to do a good job of talking about this. And sometimes, we say FSMA 204. I don't necessarily, I don't know how many folks actually understand that. That means me.
I am a grower. I am a distributor. Yes, 100%.
Christina, I love your idea of, like, let's put a series together and break it down and take it in a couple of different scenarios. My father had a small durable medical equipment, provided wheelchairs, beds, commodes, respirators, all this stuff. But in order to service hospice and to collect on Medicare, you had to have federal inspections. Yeah. And so he did the sales, he did the deliveries, he did the pickups, he did the maintenance, and he did the compliance. And when he was getting ready to retire, which he never did, he just retired eternally from the job, from the life, from everything. But I was helping him out in different areas. And I'm like, how do you do this? And it was, a small business. There was 5 total employees, and you're trying to do that. And I see that with, Yes, some of these farms, we all know the companies, they own millions of acres. I'm exaggerating here a bit, but and then there's farms that own, hey, we got 100 acres and this is what we do. And we provide for this group and they sell it at this grocery store. They all have to be compliant.
Yeah.
I think the other big challenge is that every commodity is a little different. And even within that, the way growers grow and the way things are done is slightly different. I mean, that was always kind of the big challenge for me, is almost accepting that no one does everything exactly the same. They might be similar, but it's not exactly the same. And so I think that also probably adds a layer of complexity here, is that, none of these businesses were created, with the intention of traceability.
Right.
Things have been added either over time or things have changed over time. You add a new packing line, whatever it might be. Things just kind of update as we go. And it's not necessarily designed with the flow and ease of sharing data. And so I think that's really the challenge too, is that everyone's a little different. So I'm thinking as a solutions provider, how on earth do I provide a solution when this company is doing things slightly different from this company and this and that, and then all of the different retailers that might have different expectations and needs. And I'm not necessarily just talking about traceability here, but I'm talking about all of the other compliance that might have to be done to meet a retailer. To me, it's all maddening. I am impressed that produce businesses do what they do and are sharing the data that they are right now.
Yeah. And it's,
I read.
I take it from a marketing perspective of how to inform, because you're selling a new idea, and it just takes me back to that old little cartoon of the guys pulling a sled and the guys standing next to him with the wheel, like, hey guys, want to help it? We're way too busy to talk to you, right? It's kind of the scenario that we're in, but we're going to have to leverage the psychology of understanding who you're talking to. What's most important to the farmer versus what's most important to the distributor or the packaging or the cooler. They all have a different sliver of perspective.
Yeah. I mean, maybe for some it's going to be cost, right? If you can lean into this, you're going to reduce food waste by being more compliant and being able to initiate a trace back quickly and pull only the product that needs to be pulled off. It might be time. And it also just might be pressure from those retailers. I mean, I know that there are expectations coming already ahead of the actual regulation. So I think everyone has a little bit of a different motivation, as you said, Reid. So we've just got to figure out what those carrots are on the stick to get things moving.
No doubt. Liz, did you have something else there that you were looking at? I felt like
I was just going to talk about, you were talking, Christina, about the different ways that everybody's asking for stuff. And I just thought it was a great plug for GS1 standards. That's all. I mean, it was like a softball, and I tried to, and I missed. So it's fine.
Well, I mean, I have heard a lot of folks refer to GS1 as kind of the standard for traceability and compliance. And I recognize, that the FDA, as they're pulling together their information, they can't just, say only use GS1, because it's a little biased for an agency. But, you do see a lot of alignment. You do see a lot of recognition with what GS1 provides in terms of data sharing and ability and KPIs. So it is interesting to see that kind of being recognized.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I go back to my old life of being in IT, and I started before Internet Protocol even existed. So if you had a Banyan Vines network, you couldn't talk to a Token Ring network, and you couldn't talk to a Novell network. But IP comes out as a standard, and they can all talk together. And that's really what we're getting at here, is using a common language syntax that you know what you're receiving and you know what you're sending. And it just makes it more ubiquitous for everyone. It's as simple as the address forms for, the U.S. Postal Service globally, right? It's not just in the U.S. So. Okay. We always end with two questions. All right. So what we would like to know, just closing this out, I'll go with the first question is, either in your personal life or in your professional life, what is your favorite technology that you're leveraging right now?
Well, honestly, it's pretty simple and stupid. I mean, I could say AI, but honestly, I love AirDrop. I have a Mac computer. I have an iPhone. Having AirDrop is a game changer for sharing files, adding stuff in. I mean, I can't tell you how much I use both. I mean, yes, I could go, like I said, I could talk about AI, but honestly, AirDrop to me is like a piece of innovation that I absolutely love.
I love that. I'm glad that Apple brought back the Palm Pilot feature where you just put the two ends of the phones together and the contact information goes.
Yeah.
So again, dating myself, Liz. Go ahead.
Listen, I've been there. Okay, last question. What is something new professionally or in your personal life that you would like to learn about in the near future?
Ooh, I think a new language. Despite some of my presence at some of the Packer events, I'm not fluent in Spanish, but I'd actually like to learn another language as well. Maybe self-serving Japanese, because I might have a trip to Japan next year, fingers crossed. But yeah, I think learning another language is really important if I can't become fluent in Spanish.
Wow, I love that. That's fantastic. Well, listen, thank you so much for being with us today. Greatly appreciated it. And we sincerely, we hope that people will check out your podcast after listening to this one.
Yeah, well, I hope so too. But thank you for having me on. It wasn't hard to trade positions and not be the host.
Awesome.
Thank you for joining the Next Level Supply Chain with GS1 US. If you enjoyed today's show, you can subscribe to our feed or explore more great episodes wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to share and follow us on social media. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.